Good evening and welcome to the 2015 Federal Election Forum. My name is Lucy Zanardo and I'll be your moderator this evening. I'd like to begin by recognizing our event host today, the Rotary Club of Kitimat, and our sponsors, the BC Northern Real Estate Board, the Chamber of Commerce, Mount Elizabeth Theatre, and the Northern Sentinel Press. Thank you for your support in this forum. As well, we have members of Rotary and Toastmasters in our, that will be providing timing for our event, and they're located in the front row. This evening, we have 3 of the 5 federal candidates in our riding of Skeena Bulkley Valley with us. We welcome Mr. Nathan Cullen of the New Democratic Party, Mr. Brad Layton of the Liberal Party of Canada, and Mr. Don Spratt of the Christian Heritage Party of Canada. Regretfully, we received notice today that Mr. Tyler Nesbitt of the Conservative Party of Canada could not be with us due to an unexpected family emergency, and Ms. Jeannie Parnell of the Green Party of Canada sends her regrets. In order for the evening to run smoothly, we will follow this procedure. Each candidate will have a 2-minute opening statement. Timers will warn at 1 minute 30 seconds and 15 seconds of time remaining. The order has been chosen backstage. It's as follows. First, Mr. Don Spratt from the Christian Heritage Party. Second, Mr. Nathan Cullen of the New Democratic Party. And third, Mr. Brad Layton of the Liberal Party of Canada. Opening statements will be made from the moderator's podium. A panel will begin with written questions provided by the media and the public, and this is our panel. Timers will warn at 15 seconds of time remaining. Each candidate has 3 rebuttal cards for the evening and are asked to raise their cards and receive acknowledgement from the moderator prior to the next question being asked. Rebuttals are 1 minute in length. Again, timers warning 15 seconds of time remaining. Rebuttal cards will be collected after each use. After the panel questions, there will be an opportunity for audience to ask questions of the candidates. Questioners will have 30 seconds to ask their questions. Please no statements, only questions. We have members of Rotary located near the microphone, which is right out in front of me, to assist the process. Candidates will have 1 minute to respond with timers warning at 15 seconds of time remaining. Closing remarks will be in the opposite order of the opening remarks. Closing remarks will be made from the moderator's podium. Candidates will have 2 minutes to respond. Timers will warn at 1 minute 30 seconds and 15 seconds of time remaining. In all cases, as moderator, I will intervene if candidates and questioners go over their allotted time. So, to begin, I would like to invite Mr. Don Spratt of the Christian Heritage Party of Canada to the podium for his opening statement.
Good evening. Thanks for being here. Thanks to all the organizers. This is the last type of debate like this we're going to be having out of quite a series. Anyway, we haven't got much time. My name's Don Spratt. I was born and raised in Saskatchewan on a grain farm and moved to BC in 1978. Been here ever since. The struggle is always between the individual and his sacred right to express himself, the power structure that seeks to the power structure seeks conformity, suppression, and obedience, and that's from Justice William O. Douglas of the United States Supreme Court. Just about 3 days ago, the Conservative Party of Canada kicked Mr. Gerwald out in Toronto for saying something that was politically incorrect, and so he's not allowed to run for them. If you want to run as a pro-lifer in the NDP party or the Liberal Party, it's not going to happen anymore. And if you happen to be pro-life already there, you have to go along with the party line and support their stance against, in support of abortion. So that's what's happening to free speech in Canada. That's what's so disturbing. There's many important things we'll talk about tonight, not saying they're not important, but if we lose our freedom and our liberty in this country to speak what's on our hearts and our conscience, if we're driven from the public square, then the whole country is going to suffer for that. Prime Minister John Diefenbaker in 1960, when he addressed Parliament to announce the Canadian Bill of Rights, said this. He said, "I'm a Canadian, free to speak without fear, free to worship in my own way, free to stand for what I think right, and free to oppose what I believe wrong, or free to choose those who shall govern my country. This heritage of freedom I pledge to uphold for myself and all mankind." I've adopted the same thing. What's at stake today is the freedom of Canadians to speak their mind. If you don't own your own conscience and mind, you don't own much.
Thank you.
I hope I didn't take any of your paper.
No, you haven't. Thank you. I'd like to invite Mr. Nathan Cullen from the New Democratic Party to speak.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'd like to acknowledge we're on the traditional territory of the Haislan. We thank them for the permission to do our business here this evening. I guess we're up against Love Kitimat tonight, and they were handing out free pizza. So that's tough. I worry about those kinds of congruences. I want to thank also the organizers and also my fellow candidates. I wish we could all be here tonight, but unforeseen circumstances happen, to be able to present to you our different visions and ideas for this country. For the last 11 years, I've been elected the Member of Parliament for this beautiful part of the world. And my objectives were twofold. One was to help put the Northwest on the map again, so that we were in the national conversation, that we were part of the dialogue. And the second was to attempt to do politics a bit differently, to be able to reach out across to the other parties, work with other members of Parliament for the betterment of our great country. And in varying degrees, we've had some success. When I tell people I'm from Skeena now, they know exactly where that is. And when I mention places like Kitimat, you all have been in the news quite a bit. And that's a good thing, because being relevant in this world, being relevant in the politics and the affairs of the nation is essential to getting the kinds of things that we need done here. Now, I believe the story that we have to tell from the Northwest is an important one in which we struggle and challenge ourselves to have an economy and create jobs that doesn't leave the planet worse off than when we found it, that we have a viable wild salmon economy along with bringing new projects to town. We also struggle and come together, First Nations to non-First Nations, to be able to chart a path forward, one of reconciliation and respect, not courts and conflict. I look forward to this evening. I love these conversations, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'd like to invite Mr. Brad Layton from the Liberal Party of Canada to speak.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, fellow candidates. So I believe we have two problems. The first being our current government has stopped listening to the people and are taking us for granted. The second is our local MP belongs to a political party that hasn't offered a plan to Canada in this election. I believe I have the experience and passion to make a positive difference and be part of this change for you. I have lived and worked in the forest industry since 1987 in the Bulkley Valley and within this riding. I am currently in my second term as a municipal councillor. It has taught me the need to listen to the voices of our constituents and our citizens rather than being a message bearer. I'm passionate about the Northwest, and I will fight for what we need in Ottawa. I'm also running because I believe the Liberals have a good plan for us. A historic commitment to invest in our growth and kickstart our economy through a national infrastructure plan. Strong commitment to protect the environment. Important emphasis on First Nations. And I want to make sure that our national plan has a local face in our community. As your MP, I will fight to get things done and bring positive change on the issues that you have told me are important. I will ensure that the region receives a fair share of infrastructure spending. I will use my office for the local First Nations to identify issues I can advocate and improve. Establish a task force on the environment within my first 60 days as MP. Establish regional working groups and economic development with municipalities and other community leaders and citizens to promote growth in the job sector, opportunities, skills and training, and education infrastructure. Thanks.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you, candidates. So we will begin now with our panel questions, and I will be rotating the order in which they're answered. The panel will ask a question, and all three candidates will have an opportunity to reply. So, first question from the panel. I'd like to have first answering Mr. Nathan Cullen, then Brad Layton, and then Don Spratt. That order, please.
What will your party do to remedy the loss of 16 out of 17 scientific libraries?
This is, I don't know if people are familiar with this story, but we have 17 federal scientific libraries in this country, and the government shut them down and went through a shredding operation, which it's a bit strange to even think about something like that in 2015. This was some of the wealth and knowledge of our country and the science built up over the years. What's been lost has been lost. But more to the point, and I think this speaks to the future, is we have to stop muzzling our scientists. We had a federal scientist at one of our debates just recently talk about what it was like to try to work for the public, who we're the ones paying for them, and he was not able to speak to anybody, not to me as the representative, not to the media, not to anyone. Everything got vetted. If we're paying for the science to be done, then let's use the science, and let's stop muzzling those who are trying to make us a more intelligent country. Thank you.
Mr. Layton?
Yeah, so as Nathan said, muzzling of our scientists, the Liberal Party has committed that our scientists have the freedom, first and foremost, to engage us and share their information. The Liberal Party will not muzzle them. That's one of the big things that we need to do. As well, we need to invest in the data and the storing of it. And the Liberal Party has committed that we will not go down the same road the Conservatives have. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Don Spratt?
Well, I'll just have to confess to you, I hadn't heard about this. So, maybe I'm out of the loop or something. Anyway, if this is what's happened, I would say that it's a tragedy to lose any data or information that could take us forward into the future and new scientists could use. So I don't really understand it, and I don't think it should have been done if anything was destroyed.
Thank you. May I have the second question, panel?
What are your plans and commitment to universal child care?
So in this order, we'll have Mr. Brad Layton first, Mr. Don Spratt, and then Mr. Nathan Cullen.
So Liberal Party, we've committed to working with the provinces and the territories to come up with a national child care plan. As well, we need to put more money in the pockets of Canadians. So we have a child care benefit that is tax-free, unlike the current ones where we pay income tax on. So working with the provinces and the territories, we have to make sure that things are affordable. We aren't promising the $15 a day daycare, because until we sit down with the provinces and find out how much they can afford, we figure it's not responsible to set a limit on something.
Thank you. Mr. Don Spratt.
The Christian Heritage Party wants to promote and defend traditional family. They're the building block of society. We want to have $1,000 a month to assist and care for children and elderly people in the home, and streamline the adoption process and make it more affordable. A national universal daycare program would be prohibitively expensive for any party. That's not to say that we shouldn't take care of kids and single mother families and those kind of things, parent families, I should say, that need some daycare.
Thank you. And Mr. Nathan Cullen.
Well, we are the party that is committed and has costed out a $15 a day national childcare program over 7 years to create 1 million new childcare spaces. What's interesting about the proposal is we had it assessed by the Toronto Dominion Bank, that left-wing think tank, who found out that every dollar you put into affordable childcare, you actually put $1.70 back into the economy. So for some people, it's got the social program benefits, where it helps particularly single parents who can't afford the average of $900 a month for childcare in this province. Many people are paying more for childcare than they are for rent or mortgage right now. The participation rate of women in the Canadian economy is at its lowest level since 2002 and trending downwards. And a lot of that's got to do with the cost of living, the cost of affordable childcare. So we know that putting this money into the system, which we've costed out, will actually help both the economy and those families and the needs that they have, make life a little bit more affordable. Thank you.
Thank you. The next order of questions will be firstly Don Spratt, second Nathan Cullen, and third Brad Layton. Panel?
What challenges do you foresee for the Kitimat area with the potential of another construction boom, and how do you see the federal government supporting local governments for such a thing?
Well, I'm glad that there's a construction boom coming on. I'm not sure what, I guess that has to do with the smelter here and so forth, the basis of your business here to a large extent. And now the question was, how are they going to deal with it, or government's going to deal with it? I think mostly the market economy. If there's money to be made in small business here, it'll draw business, it'll increase the economy here. And I think the free market and reducing taxes on small business and cutting the red tape basically makes it possible for people to entrepreneurs to open new business and existing businesses to hire more people. And I think that the government basically isn't that much of a help. As long as we need to allow these projects to go forward, and they'll spin off a lot of other things in the community.
Thank you. Mr. Nathan Cullen, please.
Thank you. Well, we've kind of gone through this once a little bit already with the rebuild. The prospect of one or more LNG coming in brings similar effects in terms of the concerns some people have, and I think they're legitimate concerns around rent evictions and affordability for families that are living here, particularly if you don't get access to those new higher paying jobs. So casting back a few years, we've been investing in a number of the trades programs, particularly so that young folks get a shot at some of those jobs. The temporary foreign worker program has been a thorn in my side, and I think a lot of people's side, because so much of the work that happened during the most recent energy boom in Canada was going to the 300,000 temporary foreign workers that were being let into the country that went to work every single day. I would say this, that we need to transfer and have more fair share between the revenue that goes on in the municipalities that are dealing with the infrastructure and paying for all the new roads and whatnot. We need a better fair share, and we're talking about a transfer of $4 billion to Canadian municipalities through the gas tax. That'll help a lot to absorb any of that shock.
Thank you. The next order of questioning will be Mr. Nathan Cullen first.
Nope, Mr. Layton.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. I jumped over you.
Thanks. The Liberal Party has a plan for Canada to help our municipalities, our regional districts, and it's a national infrastructure investment: social infrastructure, green infrastructure, public transit infrastructure. Affordable housing is building more housing, refurbishing existing ones, renew existing co-ops that are expiring. Green infrastructure will be, is that for me?
Yeah, you're out of time. I'm kidding.
Oh.
I'm kidding.
Clean up contaminated sites to facilitate new construction. As your MP, I will fight for every cent that we can get in our riding to help our municipalities. One of the things that most people don't know is municipalities and regional districts supply 50 to 60% of the services that we get from a government, yet we only get 8 to 12% of the taxes. And our infrastructure deficits are way behind. And if the feds don't step up and put money available there, the only way we're going to fix this and get ready is to increase municipal taxes.
Thank you. My apologies for the beeping. I don't know where that came from. And at this time, I'd like to just remind everyone to turn off their cell phones. I should have made that remark earlier, so in respect of our candidates in the forum, please turn off your cell phones. The next question of the order will be Mr. Nathan Cullen, Mr. Brad Layton, and Mr. Don Spratt. Panel?
How would you address the challenges facing Aboriginal communities in Canada?
Wow, how to do this in a couple of minutes. This is a big one because this question and what we do with this question doesn't just affect First Nations people here. I would argue strongly that it affects everybody. We have a couple of key things. One is you have to make education fair. When kids go to school here in Kitimat, they get 30% less funding for kids that go to school in the village. And that's across the country. That gap, if you start kids off behind in terms of the textbooks and teachers and everything, well, then it's difficult to expect them to compete when they get out into the real world. I said it in my opening, we need a federal government that understands reconciliation and how to work with people, not just sue them. The federal government has sued First Nations 183 times to the Supreme Court of Canada over rights and title on land and lost 183 cases. So the best you could say for them is they're consistent but not very smart. So maybe stop suing and start working with across the negotiating table, not just in a courtroom. I think we can do a lot better than we're doing. We have a plan to do it.
Thank you. Mr. Brad Layton?
The Liberal Party has plans for an immediate re-engagement and renewed, respectful, and inclusive nation-to-nation process with our Indigenous peoples, our Métis, and our Inuit communities as well. Issues like housing, infrastructure, health and mental health care, community safety, policing, child welfare, and education. These are all issues that we need to deal with. Additionally, the Kelowna Accord was done 10 years ago, and the current government totally stepped away from it. We will commit to embracing it and its objectives. New investment of $515 million per year in core annual funding for kindergarten to grade 12 in First Nations. We'll work with the First Nations and Métis to enact the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, all 94 recommendations. As a matter of national priority, we will develop a federal reconciliation framework created in full partnership with Indigenous peoples.
Thank you. The following question will be answered in the following order. Firstly,
Hold on.
Oh my goodness.
There's only 3 of us, you know.
It's true, there is only 3. I'm even putting a highlight by each person that I've... So sorry about that, Mr. Don Spratt, go ahead.
Okay, I'll be quick. The Christian Heritage Party wants to, in consultation with First Nations, to reform the Indian Act, and which will allow them to maybe have greater control over their future, economic development, and but so there needs to be consultation that's honest and open and helpful.
Thank you.
Point.
Moving on to the next question, the order will be Mr. Brad Layton, Mr. Don Spratt, and Mr. Nathan Cullen.
What is your stand on the issue of targeting one woman and her personal choice of head covering to exclude her from citizenship when a tree planter with a full head of hair and beard can go in unchallenged?
I like the way you worded that, because 29 years in the forest industry, I've seen those tree planters like that.
One of them, weren't you? He used to have a full head of hair. You don't...
Anyway, myself, as well as the Liberal Party, believe that we do not have the right to tell any individual within Canada what we can wear and what we can't wear. This is a freedom that has been fought for, and it's not something that we should be going back on. This all comes around with the fear that's been being put out by the current government that isn't even being truthful, because these people that want to wear the niqab, they actually show their face before the actual ceremony. So there is no question about who they are. So why we are letting this, as it's been called in the media, a dead cat lay on the table, I don't know. So we definitely have no plans and never will restrict what somebody can wear. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Don Spratt?
Well, I definitely believe in freedom of religion. I think there are cases where, for security reasons, it's, you know, somebody has to, for example, to know who's voting. I don't know if that would be a good example. Sometimes you need government needs to be able to see who it is and make sure that their identity is taken care of. But I think that's what it should be restricted to. I don't see why this woman had to, once she'd shown her face in the pre-process, so they knew who she was, I don't see why it was a problem for her to wear this in the ceremony.
Thank you.
I guess my first question is, are we letting scruffy haired tree planters actually become Canadians? I think we're... Don't tell Harper. He'll come up with another law or something. Brad's right. This is classic cynical distraction politics. We're not talking about the economy, which is in a recession. We're not talking about climate change, which the government's not dealing with. We're not talking about the fact that we've lost 450,000 manufacturing jobs in this country since this prime minister took office. We're not talking about the fact that they just signed a massive trade deal that they're not telling anybody about a week before an election. What are we talking about? 2 women wearing a veil, which makes many people feel uncomfortable, but what the Supreme Court is going to confirm is their right to do. So what are we doing? Well, this is a party in trouble. This is what they do. Look at this hand, not at this one. I hope, and my feeling and my prayer is that Canadians won't cast their ballot on this distraction issue, but on the kind of hope in the government that they want to see come October 19th.
Thank you. The next order of questioning, we have Mr. Don Spratt first, Mr. Nathan Cullen second, and Mr. Brad Layton third. Panel?
There are too many children in foster care and too many people who cannot afford to adopt. Instead of focusing on stopping abortions, can you work to help children and families get together?
Well, certainly that's what the Christian Heritage Party is really all about. We believe that the family is the building block of society. We want to promote and defend traditional marriage. For example, my daughter is just in the process right now of adopting a little girl that's 1 year old that's been in foster care. These are the kind of things that need to happen. Children need to be put first. There's no doubt about that, whether they're in the womb or later in life as they grow up. I don't know if I can remember the rest of the question, but that's about all I can say right now.
Thank you. Mr. Nathan Cullen?
Well, adoptions are one of those things you absolutely have to get right, but we have an overstretched system and too many kids in government care. And we saw how that becomes so tragic with this young person taking their life just recently. You know, it seems, I think the question was trying to posit about people who engage in pro-life activities versus trying to enhance the other part of the system. I mean, I very much respect Non and his views. I have a different view. I'm a pro-choice candidate. But I believe that where you focus is on the supports for the person going through the ordeal and the questions and the decision that they have to face. And that means things like affordable housing, a decent paying job, a hope for the future. And then those other questions follow. Do we need to boost the adoption system in this country? Absolutely. We need more support through the provincial programs so that we don't see tragedies again like what just happened not that long ago.
Thank you. Mr. Layton?
Thanks. We need to revamp a lot of our system when it comes to dealing with children and children in dangerous situations or questionable situations. The money hasn't been there. We've seen cut after cut after cut, and we need to address this across our entire social programs. How we do it is we need to start dialogue and communication with the frontline workers, and we need to negotiate and communicate with the provinces on what is needed. For us to just try to put a Band-Aid on it over top or give a commitment to just throw money at it isn't the way to go about it. We need to find out what the problems are, when we need to work on them, and solve them from that end. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so the next panel of questions, or the next panel order will be Mr. Nathan Cullen, Mr. Brad Layton, and Mr. Don Spratt.
What is one thing that you will find challenging to support on your party's platform, and why?
Oh, thanks for starting the easy one with me. What's one thing that I find challenging to support in the party platform right now? There's, I think, and it's coming more to fruition, we need a more comprehensive answer and path forward on Syria. And I don't necessarily think this just is a fault of the NDP right now. I think all parties struggle with this because the region and that conflict is so intertwined and complex. And now the Russians are doing what they're doing. And I don't see a path out for us. I don't think that what the government's doing right now is making all that much of a difference. We need to dramatically increase the support for Syrian refugees. And we just learned today that the Prime Minister's office had stopped the application process of these same refugees because they wanted to vet every single one of them through him, I guess, which is not the appropriate response for Canada. I would say that's a challenging thing, I suppose, because the full plan that we need to develop is going to have to be done with our allies and our partners around the world, and we don't have that completely done yet.
Thank you. Mr. Layton?
I can honestly say that our entire platform I am happy with. I see my challenge with such a large riding from Bella Coola to the Yukon border, from Haida Gwaii to Fort St. James. I see the challenge of being able to cover the ground, and an MP needs to do that. We need to be in every community to find out what their challenges are, what their infrastructure needs are. And I think that's going to be my biggest challenge as your MP, will be to make sure that I'm here enough to cover the ground, that I address each community's needs, because it's not a blanket approach across the riding. We are different in every community, and that's going to be my biggest challenge, is delivering what we've promised to each community. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Spratt?
I don't really have any problems with the content of anything that's in our platform to speak of. And if you want to find out what our platform is, there's some brochures at the back you can get, and check in with chp.ca, and you can get a look at all of our policies. But I don't see anything of any consequence that I would disagree with in our party platform.
Thank you. The order of our next question will be Mr. Brad Layton, Mr. Don Spratt, and Mr. Nathan Cullen. Panel?
How will you promote a national seniors home care program?
So the Liberal Party and myself will use infrastructure spending, which we've announced in our social infrastructure envelope, of $20 billion over the next 10 years to promote building and renovating existing seniors centers, as well as helping communities attract and deal with what's needed for our seniors within our communities. It'll be $3 billion as well. How to word this properly, I'm sorry. $3 billion will be initially invested into the system for home care as well. And that will be within the first year. That's it, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Spratt?
We're going to have to increase funding as our generation, my generation, the boomers generation, gets more elderly and needs more care, and it should be in the home as much as possible because it's a lot cheaper. And so that's why the party wants $1,000 a month to assist in not only child care but elderly care in the home. And we need to increase funding for people that nurses and home care to come in. We've seen this work in our own family with our elderly, well, my own mother, and also aunts and uncles and so forth. So it needs to be increased, and it will have to be because we've just got too many people coming into the system.
Thank you. And Mr. Cullen?
So a lot of people don't know this, but this riding here in the Northwest has the highest percentage of seniors of any riding in British Columbia. And so just this past week, we announced our full suite of support ideas and spending commitments for seniors. And let me just run through a couple of them. First, we start with rolling back the Conservatives' decision to raise the age of retirement from 65 to 67. That one decision cost seniors $13,000 in their own publicly supported pensions. We want to create 40,000 home support spaces across Canada. It's $1,000 to keep somebody in a hospital bed and $55 to be able to provide them with home support. There are 5 million Canadians that woke up today without a family doctor. We want to create 7,000 new positions through the medical schools with the provinces. And lastly, the cost of prescription drugs has been skyrocketing. We've costed out a national farmer care strategy, which is the next evolution of a properly funded public healthcare system. Thank you.
Thank you. The next order will be Mr. Spratt, Mr. Cullen, and Mr. Layton. Panel?
Does a potential increase in tanker traffic in Kitimat concern you, or do you feel shipping can be done safely?
Well, certainly it can be done safely, but it's not a perfect world. And so there need to be measures taken to make sure that you can mitigate any problem that might come in the future. We have to be able to ship. We've got an economy that has to go forward. But certainly we need to do everything, and I think government can do more and needs to ensure that more is done to safeguard environmental damage, keep that from happening.
Thank you. Mr. Cullen?
Well, the first thing you got to do is roll back the cuts that happened to the Canadian Coast Guard and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, which have been in the tens of millions of dollars. They shut down that Coast Guard base at Kitsilano, which is right beside the busiest port in all of Canada. And a few months later, they had an oil spill, and it took them 12 and a half hours to put some booms around it. And we asked the government, was that acceptable in the House of Commons? And they said, that's world-class response time. That's right beside the biggest city in this province. Right now, the government is saying the only way that they'll bring more support systems, more booms and vessels, tugs and whatnot, is if people have to sign on to Enbridge Northern Gateway. And it seems a bit backwards to me. If the government recognizes that the safety protocols, especially on the west coast, the Haida Gwaii and the Inside Passage, are not sufficient, then build them up. Don't play some sort of game where you have to take on a more dangerous project just in order to get the basic safety that we deserve right now. We have a costing plan to put that support in today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Layton?
So the current government has said that they have actually increased spending on our Coast Guard. What they've done is put $5 million automated thing on our coast and cut on our people and our first response. We have to reinvest in that. We also have to make sure that our entire planned shipping routes are safe. In Haida Gwaii, they identified that they got 60 ships going by on a daily basis, they said. and they don't even have a tug out there. So we saw what happened when the Russian ship lost power. We need to invest to make sure our coast is safe. Liberals, we've also said no to oil tankers. There will be a moratorium if we're elected. We won't have oil tankers on our coast shipping raw bitumen that could endanger our oceans. Thanks.
Thank you. The next order will be Mr. Nathan Cullen, Mr. Layton, and Mr. Spratt. Panel?
If elected, what are your top 2 priorities for your term in office, and how will they affect our community?
Well, to see the end of this government would be a pretty high priority. It's been a while. And the reason I think that would be helpful broadly to our country and our reputation and everything else is that I think it would be very specifically helpful to the folks in Kitimat, because I get a certain sense of hostility towards the North or BC. And when a government wrote an open letter from the Prime Minister's office and said, you know, you're a bunch of foreign-funded radicals and you're enemies of the state, I took some offense to that. Because I didn't think we lived in a country in which you can, you know, raise your voice and raise questions, and that somehow makes you an enemy of Canada. I also believe that our economy, so the top priority for me is doing something about recovering the near 500,000 manufacturing jobs we've lost, and to reverse this trend where every natural resource we have is being exported raw as fast as we can. We got to get back to adding value to the wealth that this country has, as opposed to sending it off somewhere else so that they can create the jobs.
Thank you. Mr. Layton?
So my first 2 priorities. The first one will be to ensure that all the promises that have been made to us are honored, that are followed through. Too often we see promises made in Ottawa that we don't get, and we don't get a good reason. So I will fight to make sure the promises that were made are done. The second thing I will do as well is establish regional working groups and economic development with all the municipalities, as I stated earlier, and other community leaders and citizens to promote growth in our jobs, opportunities for federal government to assist in skills and trades training, education infrastructure. These groups will be divided regionally because every area within our vast riding has different challenges, different weaknesses, and we need to identify those, build and invest in infrastructure to make sure that we can grow in this tough times.
Thank you. Mr. Spratt?
First priority would be to restore respect for our Constitution, and some of the biggest violators are those 9 lawyers that run the Supreme Court of Canada in Ottawa, because what's happening, and many people probably don't realize this, but they're starting to tell we the people through our legislators what laws we need to make and the parameters within which they need to be made and meet. And that's totally backwards. We have representatives. If we're going to have these lawyers decide make all the big decisions in the country, we probably don't need many senators or members of parliament. So I say that we need to clip their wings back to their proper constitutional limitations, and they should be interpreting the law, not making the law.
Thank you. We do have a rebuttal, our first rebuttal by Mr. Cullen, if you'd like to begin.
How exciting. Well, the reason I want to rebut this is because there's some sort of suggestion that the Supreme Court of Canada is just 9 lawyers, whereas opposed to what they are, which is performing an incredibly vital role in interpreting our Constitution and then testing the laws that Parliament passes to make sure that the laws aren't illegal, unconstitutional. The challenge we've had these last number of years is we have a government in Ottawa who doesn't much respect the Constitution. And the way I know that is that they pass bill after bill that fails the constitutional test. So what are we doing? Why do we have a government that knowingly passes laws just for a photo op, and then 12 months later we spend a few $1 million challenging it all the way to the Supreme Court and losing? The court, what it does is vital to what we need, which is to have somebody there that has a check and protection of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The reason the court sometimes takes up challenging questions is that Parliament fails to do so. And if Parliament fails to do so and the public challenge an idea and want to push forward an agenda of some kind, well, then they take it to the court as a natural recourse. So we need a more active and engaged Parliament and stop this legislating from the bench business. That's just not true.
The next order of questions will be Mr. Layton, Mr. Spratt, and Mr. Cullen. Panel?
What is your commitment to housing for all?
So the Liberal Party, we have the infrastructure spending, which we've announced, of $60 billion over the next 10 years. Social infrastructure and housing is a key component of that. We will work with provinces, municipalities, regional districts. We will make this money available to build new low-cost housing. We also will remove the GST from all houses built by contractors that are designated for low income and low rent. This will remove the GST from all supplies and all the costs for them building it, as well as we'll work with municipalities for re-signing the co-ops that are expiring right now, which you've probably heard a lot of. This will take place over the next 10 years, and it'll be also used to kickstart our economy and supply jobs at the same time.
Thank you. Mr. Spratt?
Again, I think most of the construction business and so of low-cost housing needs to be in the free market, but there needs to be incentives made to developers and builders to actually build those. And and of course, people that are destitute need to probably have some housing that's put in by the government if they can't get into some of these other areas. But we need to lower housing by cutting the red tape for getting into the business of providing those kind of houses.
Thank you. And Mr. Cullen?
So know this, that we're the only so-called rich country, OECD developed nation that has no national housing strategy at all. It might surprise people, but it was canceled under Chrétien in the 90s, and the feds simply just pulled themselves away from the housing question, leaving it primarily to the cities. And as Brad said earlier, the cities have the lowest ability to actually raise taxes and spend money. So they've been crying poor for quite a few years, and that's true. So we have a plan to put 40,000 affordable housing units out there. I think we also have to change our concept of who we're talking about that's having a hard time affording a good home. For folks in Vancouver, the entry level is so incredibly high. What are young people supposed to do these days? It's not people just on welfare or folks that just don't have a job that are having a hard time. It's working people, many working people. So we need to change our concept and then actually support the cities with some of the basic transfers that used to take place to build more co-op, co-housing, and just more affordable housing broadly.
Thank you. The next order will be Mr. Spratt, Mr. Cullen, and Mr. Layton. Panel?
With the Northern Gateway project currently being challenged in the courts, what future do you see for oil pipeline development?
Well, I think that the federal government is in charge of transportation because, constitutionally, because they have to be able to break some deadlocks and things have to go forward. So I think these pipelines, because we have actually a lot of resources that need to get to market, there has to be a way to get them there. But that needs to be done safely, both for people, for the environment, and needs to be done in consultation with the various territories that it's going through and the people that have an interest there. And many of these, each of these communities has their own needs and their own challenges. And so consultation, open, honest consultation, but at the end of the day, somebody has to break some ties, and you can't please everybody all the time, and we have to get things to market. So.
Thank you. Mr. Cullen, please.
Thank you. There's a concept out there when you're doing resource development called social license. It's a pretty simple but yet hard thing to acquire sometimes, which means that when a company seeks to build a mine or pipeline or any of these things, they need the broad and general support of the communities in which they wish to operate, because it's us that take the risk, right? So this question about Gateway, for me, from the very beginning, has always been a risk-benefit question. What type of risk are we exposed to with a diluted bitumen pipeline versus what are the proposed benefits, which are small, while risks remain great? There's new projects that are popping up now, talking about building upgraders or moving not diluted bitumen, but some other product. A lot of them are still highly speculative. They don't have any funding, they don't have a route, they don't have an application. But at least they're having the conversation about not doing just raw export, where the country as a whole takes the risk with so little benefit. So I encourage those conversations, but we need an environmental assessment process that is actually an environmental assessment process as to the joke that we have right now.
Thank you. Mr. Layton?
So the Liberal Party has committed to no Northern Gateway. And the main reason is when you hear of oil being shipped, you think of regular oil or sweet crude, as we've used oil in the past. Bitumen is nothing like that. It is totally devastating when there's a spill. It isn't clean up. You can't clean it up like you can clean up regular oil. And talking to experts that you've heard on the news and stuff like that, they say that you can only clean up about 10% of it. So until we get to a system where we can ensure that we don't spill it into our water, because we're not going to be able to clean it up, we have to say no to that type of a project. However, there is patented technology that can take bitumen, clean it up, so it is almost like sweet crude. And this is what we need to be doing on the site where it comes out, because it's already in the ground there, and then taking that and shipping it to our markets or to refineries.
Thank you. The next order will be Mr. Cullen, Mr. Layton, and Mr. Spratt. Can I have the next question?
What do you feel are the industries or developments that are best suited for the Northwest, and how would you support our communities to entice them to this area?
Well, before I got into politics, I was in small business, so I'm biased. I think small businesses are often the places where the most innovation. Small businesses in Canada create 8 out of 10 new jobs over the last 15 years. It's for that reason that we pushed and now have in our platform a 20% cut to the small business tax rate, because that's where a lot of the innovation happens. In the Northwest broadly, we say diversify a lot. We got to actually put some meat on those bones. That we have a lot of energy in the Northwest, and this constant fixation with the bitumen pipeline has taken up a lot of energy and time for building some of the alternatives. We got a beautiful Run of the River project open just north of Terrace, up in the Iskut country. We can actually do much more with the energy that exists here. The world's moving in leaps and bounds towards a cleaner, greener economy, and the good news is not only does it do less damage to the environment, it actually creates more jobs in the process, so the true and rare win-win situation.
Thank you. Mr. Layton?
So to diversify within the Northwest, we have a few problems that we have to fix, and some of it is in our infrastructure. If we want to entice new and green technologies to our area, we need to make sure that our backbone of communications and internet is in place. And we have huge gaps across our riding, and we need to work on that. We need to get money to fix that so we can entice businesses like software development. There's no reason that they need to be sitting in Vancouver. They could be sitting here in Kitimat. But we need to make sure that the infrastructure is in place to attract these businesses. We can do green hydro. We can do it through wind. We can do it through tidal. But we need to have the infrastructure in place before we're going to attract these kind of businesses. Small business, yes, but most of what we use in small business, because I've been in small business for 29 years, we're still fighting to get that communications and that backbone in place so we can compete.
Thank you. And Mr. Spratt?
Well, attracting business to the area, I think you start with what you've got, and one of the demands is that we put some pipelines through the area. That's going to bring some jobs with some professionals, workers here. It'll attract other people that are entrepreneurs possibly to come and build businesses in this area, and that will build the economy over time. But you start with what you've got at hand, the most shovel-ready type of jobs you can get, and again, do it safely, do it environmentally safe and everything, but it creates jobs and it creates opportunity for young people to get into the work as it goes through in the construction phase, and there'll be ongoing jobs as well, to some extent, to a lesser extent. But you work with what you got at hand that can start the process.
Thank you. The next order of questions will be Mr. Layton, Mr. Spratt, and Mr. Cullen. Panel?
How will you contribute to Canada meeting its greenhouse gas emissions?
So the first thing that we need to do is we need to show up and take the lead in the world to do this. In November, there's a meeting in Paris, and the Liberal Party, we have committed to be there and to show up, to do the right thing. We're the only country that pulled out of the Kyoto Accord. The current government hasn't stepped up. They said that they dropped emissions in greenhouse. Well, it wasn't them that dropped it. It was the recession we had in 2008 that our industries went down. So we need to step up. We need to work with the provinces. Some provinces have carbon taxes in place or caps and trade or whatever that they want in place. We will not dictate how it has to be. We will work with the provinces to make an infrastructure right across the country to deal with our carbon and greenhouse gases.
Thank you. Mr. Spratt?
Personally, I'm, I guess what you'd call a global warming denier. And the party does not believe that CO2 is a pollutant. And we're against any carbon taxes or cap and trade because we think that's just a chance for governments internationally to gather more, take more money out of our pockets. And we don't think that they'll be able to do anything but gain a lot of money, but not have any effect or very little effect on our environment, global warming.
Thank you.
That was a small clap.
And Mr. Cullen?
This is why I appreciate Don, is because he's at least got the courage to say the things that he believes as opposed to the current government that sort of mouths the words but doesn't do anything about it. The government's own targets, which are incredibly weak, their own department has said they're not even going to come close to making them. This goes back to a very old and wrong bias that you got to choose between a job and clean air and clean water. That's so fundamentally flawed. We know in the last 2 years alone, globally, that investments in green and clean technology have far outpaced that of oil, gas, and coal combined. So the world's moving this way, and many of our provinces have tried, and municipalities are doing their part, but the lack of federal leadership has been breathtaking and actually quite damaging, not just to our reputation, but I would argue to our economy. So you put a price on the pollution. The polluter pay principle is foundational in Canadian law, and then you start to invest in those solutions that create those local jobs in home renovation and clean energy production.
Thank you. The next order of questions will be Mr. Spratt, Mr. Cullen, and Mr. Layton.
BC has significant child poverty. What are your plans to address this?
I think we need, as we've said before, we need to strengthen the family, which has been weakened. I don't think that anybody can challenge that over the years. There's more divorce than there's ever been in the past. And I think it's because of the breakup of the family and the weakening that children are often left to their own devices. And and they make decisions that further exasperate the problem because they suffer the consequences of that. And so the building block of society is the family, and that's what we need to strengthen. That's what we want to do. That's why we feel that two parents in the home are what children really need, and that's the best solution for them. But there are others that need to be. Look, I spent a lot of time in Russia doing work with orphanages over there. I shipped a lot of medical equipment over there for needs, maternity hospital and so forth. And but boy, when the government creates a lot of problems that they can't solve, and they created a great problem over there.
Thank you.
And they weren't able to solve it, and it's not good for kids.
Mr. Cullen?
Yeah, I really don't like this tact here that I was raised for most of my childhood in one of those so-called broken homes. I fundamentally disagree that what the problem is if there was the traditional family and it has to be a certain construct, then child poverty disappears. I absolutely disagree. Families take all shapes and sizes these days. We just got to kind of go with that. No rolling back the clock to leave it to Beaver. The notion is that if people don't have decent housing and don't have decent paying jobs, then you're going to have more child poverty. If single moms in particular are struggling just to pay the rent, you think they're going to have lots of extra money to get the books and school supplies, and their kids will also live in poverty. That's why we're pushing a $15 national minimum wage and encouraging the provinces to follow suit, because we think that's a living wage, a decent wage. You want to get at child poverty? Help the parents, particularly help the single moms, because those are the real heroes of this country. It shouldn't be validated for being single moms.
Thank you. Mr. Layton?
So the first thing we'll do is institute a child care benefit that is tax-free. It will deliver more money to families in Canada than anything the NDP and the Conservatives have planned. Additionally, affordable housing, as I said before, is a key point of our infrastructure plan. As well, we are making $200 million annually available to people that, under the current system, can't access skills and trades training to help them get a better job. With these, we'll lift 315,000 children out of poverty with our plan. Additionally, oh, I lost it there. Sorry, I got to go on that one.
That's fine. Thank you.
Excuse me. Am I allowed a
Rebuttal.
to-
Wonderful.
Am
We
I
like
allowed a
rebuttals.
rebuttal at all to Mr.
I'll allow. All right. We'll take your card and
Okay.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I'm not trying to put down Mr. Cullen or kids raised in single families or mothers in that condition or fathers. That's not where I'm coming from. Those things do happen, and that's reality. And it's not a put down to say that the ideal is to have an intact family for all children. That's the ideal, but it's not a put down to say that there's lots of kids that are raised in single parent families, and they do a wonderful job of doing that, and the kids turn out just fine. So I'm not trying to put you down at all.
I understand.
thank you. All right. Just to bring you up to date on the process, we'll be taking panel questions till about 8:20. So we have another 15 minutes of questions. The order next will be Mr. Cullen, Mr. Layton, and Mr. Spratt. Panel?
What is your party's opinion on vote splitting?
We're against it. This is the concept that it's generally characterized that there's the sort of conservative vote, and then there's sort of everything else. And then what happens if everything else splits their vote, and then the conservatives sneak back into government with something like they had last time, which was just north of 38% of the vote. People are going to do what they're going to do. Some people are going to be strategic, and they're going to vote this way to not vote against that person. And it's not an ideal system, because it's a bad voting system, which was invented before the light bulb and maybe needs an update. Because what happens with a country that has only 60% of people showing up to the polls, and a government can form with 38% of the vote, that's less than a quarter of the country of voting age voting for that government. It allows them to very narrow cast and tighten their policies for just one group of Canadians. We need a mixed member proportional system so that every vote in the country counts. And that would be a lot better than what we've got.
Thank you. Mr. Layton?
Thanks. So the Liberals have committed that this will be the last election, if we are voted in, to do first past the post. We would form a committee with all parties, NDP, Conservatives and Liberals, CHP, anybody that has been elected, Green Party, to come up with a plan for a new system. The NDP likes one way, the Conservatives want to leave it the way it is, and we want to find out what will work and institute that. Vote splitting, you know, it's a term that's thrown out there. I promote to all citizens and all Canadians I talk to that you need to get informed. You need to look at the plan of the party and look at your MP and decide who is going to help steer our country to the country that you want. and what you need within your area and what is important to you. Deciding
Thank
that
you.
based on...
Thank you. Mr. Spratt?
Our leader has been attending conferences in Ottawa on this whole topic of proportional representation. And so in principle, we do support this idea, but of course it always depends on how it's drafted and defined. So we like it as far as we know.
Thank you. The next order of questions will be Mr. Layton, Mr. Spratt, and Mr. Cullen.
Canada is the only developed country with a universal healthcare system that does not include prescription drug coverage. By the use of generic drugs, bulk purchasing, and negotiations, Canadians would save billions of dollars with universal public drug coverage. Would your party endorse universal pharmacare?
Good question. The Liberal plan is for us to work with the provinces and the territories to buy drugs in bulk to get the cheapest price we can. One of the things, though, that has just happened that we need to find out what's going on to make sure that this isn't endangered in our health is the TPP was just signed. We have no idea what's in it yet, whether some things that were leaked earlier were that drug costs were going to be higher and generic drugs weren't going to be available to us. So this is a huge concern. We haven't committed to pharmacare for drugs right across the country, but we will work with the provinces and buy bulk and work to get the cheapest deals that we can for the drugs for the people that need them.
Thank you. Mr. Spratt?
It's certainly an issue that's in flux. Now, it's provincial jurisdiction mainly, but certainly there's a lot changing in the pharmaceutical area. There are stories in the United States right now about drugs that have been on the market for years and they've gone up 15,000% because some company bought that particular patent out on that particular drug and just jacked the price way up. Now that's when government needs to step in and say there's something wrong with that and do something. And I think that the federal government needs to consult with the provincial governments across the country to find a solution to address all these things. But certainly drugs are and the cost of them are a big issue.
Thank you. Mr. Cullen?
People don't know this, but when we first envisioned a public healthcare system, that was meant to be the first step. The second step was the medicines you need for a public healthcare system. And we never took that second step. Parties promised, and this is where Brad and I disagree. This notion of working with the provinces, one thing that's been clear from the provinces and the demands that have come from them, that it's going to cost some money. The good news for the public health system is that if you get people, particularly seniors in this case, there was a study recently done that 40% of seniors are foregoing filling their prescriptions because they can't afford it. Well, what happens when you go through the medical system and you pay for that publicly and the doctor and all the tests and you get your prescription, you don't fill it, well, the person ends up back in the system, costing the whole system a lot more. So this is one of those things that actually requires leadership and it requires investment. We're putting $2.5 billion, and it's been lauded by the Canadian Association of Retired People, the Medical Association of Canada, and those that understand how the medical system could work better, more efficiently, with better health outcomes for people.
Thank you. The next order of questions will be Mr. Spratt, Mr. Cullen, and Mr. Layton. Question, please.
Do you think we will gain or lose jobs due to the TPP agreement?
I think we'll gain jobs. Overall, I think we have to make sure that we don't destroy some of our own industry that maybe needs some protection, at least initially. So it has to be, some things might have to be phased in, like the dairy industry and so forth, because of the measures that are already in place. But I think overall, free trade is a good thing as long as we don't sell out all our jobs, and even more importantly, because it's such a big international thing, we don't lose national sovereignty to countries that don't deserve to be telling us how to do business.
Thank you. Mr. Cullen?
Well, the best way to guess at future outcomes is to look at past behaviors. So let's look at some past behavior from this government that signed this deal in the middle of an election, which I find a bit controversial, and then not releasing the details. You think if it was such a great trade deal, we'd all know exactly what's in it. and there's some problems in this. So they've signed almost 50 trade deals since taking office. And on the surface, you think that's good. Well, we now have the highest trade deficit in the country's history. Over that same period of time, we've lost 450,000 manufacturing jobs. And now we have NAFTA, but on steroids, and nobody knows about it. We had a whole election about NAFTA before. Now, a week to go, we find out there's this massive trade deal with 40% of the globe signing on, and we don't know what's in it. From pharmaceuticals to intellectual property to agriculture to manufacturing, all of this is included in this trade deal, and none of you know, nor I, what's in it. I find that fundamentally undemocratic, and I just simply don't trust this government to get Canada's best interests into a deal because their record has shown that they haven't been able to do it so far.
Thank you. The next order of questions will be Mr. Cullen, Mr. Layton, and Mr. Spratt. Oh my goodness, sorry about that.
He agrees with what
Mr.
I
Layton.
said, though. So
I jumped over you. Thanks for catching that. Go ahead, Mr.
So,
Layton.
we need trade. We need trade deals. However, when they are negotiated in secrecy, no transparency, and all we have to go on are leaked documents that were really scary, it's hard to judge it. I will wait till we see what is in it before I judge it as a good trade package or a bad trade package. However, I do have concerns with this government having done it this way, as well as already announcing compensation packages, makes me think there's some bad stuff in there. So when it finally comes public, if this government doesn't put it in public, at least we know the Americans have already committed to putting it out within 30 days. So we will be able to read it and see what is in this and make an honest decision, an honest evaluation of it, and make an evidence-based decision. Thanks.
Thank you. The next order will be Mr. Cullen, Mr. Layton, and Mr. Spratt.
What is your plan as our representative for future economic development in Kitimat?
It's a big question. I talked about this at several reference points. This community, over its life, has had a off again, on again, sometimes more off than on, relationship with the Haisla people whose territory this is on. My firm belief is that progress will be incredibly difficult if that relationship goes back to being one of conflict and lack of respect and communication. So the path forward is the opposite of that, which is dialogue and communication and more respect. And I think there's actually a leadership role at the federal level to enhance this. I don't think the approach that the government has taken to this point with respect to the Northwest has been at all beneficial. We were able to drag more federal funding out of what is a relatively hostile government into the Northwest than any other opposition riding in BC. There's just so much more we can do if we spend so much less of our time fighting one another.
Thank you. Mr. Layton?
So economic development within any community, Kitimat, as well as all the other 49 communities, 51 First Nations across our riding. As an MP, I would need to sit down with stakeholders and citizens within each community, Kitimat included, and find out what our strengths and weaknesses are. Find out what hurdles that we need to overcome. Infrastructure spending will be a kickstart, but we need to look long-term down the road. What kind of investments do we need to be able to bring the businesses that we want and the economic development within our communities? And that will take input from you guys. I need, as your MP, to take the information to Ottawa and say, this is what we need to make this happen, instead of them telling us what we need. But that takes your guys' input. It takes sitting down and deciding what we want for a future and going out and getting it. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Spratt?
Christian Heritage Party would reduce taxes and improve services by paying off the national debt. It'll take a while to do that, but that'll put more money back into spendable money back into our communities. End corporate welfare and minimize red tape for small businesses and rebuild Canada's infrastructure using the Bank of Canada to reduce dependence on the chartered banks.
Thank you. This will be our final question from the panel. So this will be our last opportunity from the panel. Then we will, after which we'll take a 10-minute break, stretch our legs, and we'll return for some audience participation and questions. So the order of questions will be Mr. Layton, Mr. Spratt, and Mr. Cullen.
Do you support liquefied natural gas tankers moving through the Douglas Channel?
So I have committed that LNG, if done properly, could be done within our riding. I've committed to that. However, my concern is, up until now, our environmental assessment process has been so secretive and non-transparent that I honestly can't say that I've seen all the data or that anybody has. So until we fix that environmental assessment process and make it transparent and reestablish the trust by us in the process, I can't say for sure that it is safe right now. And if it's not safe, I don't support it. But we can make it safe. We just need to know what the problems are and have it communicated to us. And right now, we're not getting that kind of information out of our assessment project.
Thank you. Mr. Spratt?
Well, there's a tremendous amount of natural gas in this country that could be exported and bring some money into this country that's needed at international market prices. But the first thing is you have to have safety for people. So it's got to be located, if you put an LNG plant in a safe place, and we have to make sure that we can transport it safely. And we have, so it's both people and the environment. Now, in Richmond, there is an LNG plant that's probably been there for over 4 decades. I don't know how long it's been there. And there's been tankers in and out of there on the Fraser River ever since they set that thing up. So it can be done safely. I've never heard of any problem there. Can't say it, there hasn't been one, but I've never heard of one. And so I think if it's done right, it can be done safely, and we certainly need it to drive our economy. And so the responsibility of government is to make sure it's done safely and let business go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Cullen?
Yeah, not a lot of distinction here. I think it can be done safely. I've got more confidence in local people. I've got more confidence in the Haisla than I do with the federal government. I think they got a kind of a big rubber stamp in Ottawa, and they just wait for a project to come by and they stamp it. It shows the importance of the ability for the public, or the confidence of the public in whatever the assessment is. The new joint review panel rules that are going on with other projects like Kinder Morgan have gotten from the ridiculous to the absurd. You can't cross-examine proponents anymore. You can't ask them questions. Recently, Harper appointed the chief lobbyist from Kinder Morgan onto the review panel that's reviewing Kinder Morgan. And the National Energy Board had to suspend itself because of the obvious conflict of interest. I mean, that kind of a myopic view of the world is very cynical and doesn't actually help industry or anybody, because you need that public support and confidence that the decisions being made are being made with science and transparently, as my colleagues have said.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates, so far, and also for the panel for asking such great questions. We will take a 10-minute break and return at 8:30 for some questions from the floor. Thank you. Steve, in a moment.
Look forward to watching that one on your site later. Yeah.
Just another couple of minutes.
But yeah, I think it was a terrace. Still like 5 hours and 33 minutes of footage left. Think you're gonna make it? Hopefully.
You know, he's getting old. After 11 years in office, it's kind of slowed him down. Yeah, long time.
Hey, it's getting old politically too, huh? It's getting a bit old politically too, huh?
Oh. Last one.
Yeah, let's get out of
What
here.
is it? What time is it? You doing what?
Yeah, we do. It's 8:35.
So 20 minutes only.
Yeah.
It's supposed to stop at 9.
He gets, oh, here he is.
Don't worry, we weren't talking about you while you were gone, about how slow you're getting in your old age.
Well, I had to go get myself a minute behind the
We're going to have to start billing you.
Thank you for your return to the auditorium. We'll begin now with questions. So I'd like to invite anyone to the microphone, and we can stand in a order. I just wanted to go over a couple things before we begin again. Just to ask you all to consider asking your questions to the entire panel. We'd like everybody to have the opportunity to reply. We'd also like to have your answers or your questions 30 seconds in length only. The Toastmasters have a red card that will signify when your time is up to stop asking your question. So please respect that card and know when to stop. And please be respectful and ask only questions. Please don't offer statements, and that would be helpful for everyone. And that'd be good. So I would like to ask the first question. Oh, but before we, I'm just going to ask you one more time. I'm just going to go over the order in which the answers will happen if they're not directed personally. First, it'll be Mr. Cullen, then Mr. Layton, and then Mr. Spratt. So the first question, please.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all to our little city perched on the edge of paradise. Okay. Like Stephen Harper considers the missing and murdered First Nations women to be a policing issue and low on his radar. Do the candidates recognize this to be a tragic socio-economic echo of the residential school system? And if so, what responsibility does the federal government bear to right the wrongs of the past?
Thank you. Mr. Cullen?
I'll thank you for the question. I'll make one small correction to the question. He didn't say it wasn't low on his radar. He said it wasn't on his radar at all, which is, I try to think of a prime minister making that kind of a comment if it were any other group of Canadians that had lost 1,200 women and girls through murder and disappearance. So our commitment as New Democrats is within the first 100 days to launch an inquiry, national inquiry. The federal government launched a national inquiry into missing salmon on the Fraser River, and yet can't find the will or the ability to do one when we're missing 1,200 Native women and girls. But beyond the inquiry itself is the call to action, getting at the root causes of these things. Show the respect for the families, and that's what they're calling for. But then take what you find and address those root causes, the systemic violence, the justice system that fails far too many Aboriginal people, and start that up. I've walked this highway with too many families looking for their daughters and their mums and their aunts. We need this to stop.
Thank you. Mr. Layton?
So the Liberal Party is committed to doing the inquiry that the families have requested immediately. One of the things that needs to happen, and we will make sure it happens, there's been 30 to 40 different investigations, inquiries, reports, but no action has been taken. And the current government not having it on its radar is just totally wrong. We need to do the inquiry. We need to look at the recommendations that come out of it. We need to look at the 30 to 40 investigations, reports, take the recommendations out of there, and come with a plan to make sure that this does not go on any longer than as soon as we can change this government that's in place. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Spratt?
Well, there's been a problem on Highway 16 that hasn't been solved and resolved, and I think the priorities of our government's Justice Department and the Crown often gets wrong. And I want to just point out, we're from Surrey, raised our family there, and a number of years ago I was down on the 44th and Victoria, and this was during the time when downtown East Side Native women were disappearing and others. And at the same time as I was down at this site at 44th and Victoria, 3 police cruisers were going around the block because there's an abortuary there and a bubble zone around it. And we were in the corner, just standing in the corner, within the bubble zone, yes, just talking and praying. And we had these cruisers going around, and one pulled up, and the guy's got his ear sticking way out the window to hear if we might say the word abortion so he could arrest us. And at that very time is when all these women were missing out on the downtown east side. And eventually their remains were found in Port Coquitlam.
Thank you. The next question will be read or answered in the following order: Mr. Layton, Mr. Spratt, and Mr. Cullen. Could I have your question, please? Sorry.
Hi. So I had a question about would your parties consider free post-secondary education for the younger generations?
Mr. Layton?
I personally would love if we could get to where we could have free education. It wasn't too many decades ago where tuition was free in our universities and college. Unfortunately, with the current system that we have, we're paying way too much. 300% I've been hearing the last while over the last 2 decades. Unfortunately, we don't have it in our budget to be able to make it free. But we do have steps like increasing the grants for low-income families to be able to help the children go to post-secondary education. We've also raising the ceiling, which hasn't changed forever. My daughter wanted to go to post-secondary. I was a single parent. I didn't make enough money, but I made enough money that she couldn't get student loans. So we have to change that. As well, the problem is the provinces themselves have control over this. So the feds, we give them money and earmark it for certain things, but if we throw a bunch of more money into our education system, we have to ensure
Thank
that...
you.
Oh, run out of time.
Out of time. Thank you. And Mr. Cullen?
First of all, thank you for the question, Zoe, and thank you for coming out tonight. Zoe was one of the students that was asking questions in the high school this morning where we had a debate, and I wish you all could have been here. These young people would have done you proud. The intelligence, the ambition, the idealism, these guys were great. On the tuition has increased 300% in the last 20 years, 300%. It's getting out of reach of most working people, most middle class or low income folks. We have a plan to reduce that back down, but Brad's got a very good point, which is there used to be a string tied to that transfer. When Ottawa cut the check and sent it to the provinces for post-secondary or health, that string got cut in the 90s. And then the provinces do this little shell game. You give them $100 million more for post-secondary, they move $100 million out of their post-secondary budget and tuitions go up. We need to tie those strings back for any contributions we make to keep tuitions low and then start to lower them back down to affordability.
Thank you. The order of the next question will be Mr. Spratt, Mr. Cullen. Oh. Did I knock you off?
Out.
Yes, I did.
I'm still
Sorry
here.
about that.
Yeah. Okay. Was that the go-ahead?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Tuitions are too high, but there's real costs associated with education. Buildings like this, and there's some beautiful campuses, and we should be very proud of them. But we've all heard the saying, there's no such thing as a free lunch, and there's no such thing as a free education because somebody's paying for it, and it's the taxpayers if we were to do that. People have worked their way through university. One thing that I advocate, because it develops self-reliance and so forth, is that young people focus maybe a little more on getting a trade before they go into higher education, so that even if that didn't work out, they can fall back on their trade in the future and throughout their lives in most cases. So it's just wisdom, I think, to do that, and then as you get a little older and know what you want to do more, go into another profession that you might acquire through university.
Thank you. The order of the next question will be Mr. Spratt, Mr. Cullen, and Mr. Layton. Could I have the question, please?
I'm probably going to give away my age, but when I went to university, tuition was $450. So my question is for...
So was a new car, though. I mean,
That was a while ago. Anyway, this question is for Nathan Cullen. Are you allowed to choose a person?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Why do you suppose international observers from the Organization for Security and Economic Cooperation in Europe are going to monitor the process of this election?
I was told at the break not to be so negative on the government. This is tough. The reason we're having election observers in this election is because in the last 3 previous elections, one party, who I shall not name, cheated. The way they cheated was they would go out, like what's going on right now is everybody's phoning around and door knocking and trying to find out who's voting for who, right? And what one party, shall not be named, what they did with everybody not voting for them, they sent out 450,000 robocalls the night before the election to Liberals and NDP supporters. And the robocall said, this is Elections Canada phoning. Your polling station isn't here at the school. It's over in Kitimat Village. And so people went. And then they got there and they got turned back around and they said, what are you doing here? You got to go back over to the high school. And so what do you think a lot of voters did? They went home. That's electoral fraud. 450,000 phone calls went out doing this. There's a reason that we need observers, and it's a sorry state that it's true, and we need them. I'm concerned with the voter cards and all the irregularities going on already. We got to pay attention that this vote is done fairly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. If this is for all candidates, the order will be Mr. Cullen, Mr. Layton, and Mr. Spratt. Can I have your question, please?
Yes, it is for all candidates. Jim Thorne here, Kitimat. I am a longtime devotee of the CBC, Canada's national broadcaster, and I've been rather appalled with what has happened with the CBC over recent years, and particularly the hostile attitude shown by the current government. But I want to hear from the candidates who have graced us our debate here in Kitimat tonight. I want to hear what they're going to do to restore the vigor of the CBC.
Thank you. Mr. Cullen?
Thank you. Thank God for Terry Molesky is what I say sometimes, because that guy knows how to hold people to account. 2 things. One is funding. We have committed to restoring the $150 million cut that the current government has made to the CBC. Yet I think we need to go farther than that. We've gone away from some of those local stories. There's too many repeat broadcasts going on, or stories from other countries which are interesting, but yet we're not telling our own. And from those smaller communities, that's what the richness of the CBC is. In such a vast country like Canada, we're made up of our stories, and being able to connect to people on the other side in small towns in Newfoundland and the far north. That's what I love the CBC for. So we not just restore the funding, but restore the purpose of what this gem does, is keeps this big, beautiful, spread out country together and connected. That's what the CBC is there for. We need to restore it to its purpose, and a little bit of funding and a little bit of guidance, I think, would help do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Layton?
So the Liberal Party, we have committed to restoring the $150 million funding, as well as increased funding in arts, which will help our films and film studios within our country. The CBC, as the BBC in Europe, and that they are our way of telling our stories here, of showing our multiculturalism, which, by the way, today is our 44th anniversary of our multicultural in Canada. So the CBC, besides used to show us all our hockey that we like to watch, we need to keep our investment in there. We need to keep it strong, or we're going to lose that Canadian voice to American channels and lose our self within that. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Spratt?
I did research on the early days of broadcasting in Canada for a company I worked for in the past, and there was a time when CBC was needed in Canada, very legitimately. But I think today it could stand on its own 2 feet and should be. I don't think it's fair that other companies, broadcast companies, should have to compete with a subsidized organization. They should be able to compete on a level playing field. And so I guess that's where I depart from some of my friends here.
Thank you. All right, then order the next question will be Mr. Layton, Mr. Spratt, and Mr. Cullen. Can I have your question, please?
Throughout the Skeena riding, there's a variety of economic opportunities presenting themselves. You've mentioned some of them, being independent power projects, mineral projects, elsewhere in the riding, with the light natural gas on the coast. And a lot of these we have groups of people have different discussions. One group is talking about the economic opportunities, but other groups that have some concerns. Is there a role for a federal MP to try and bring those groups together and kind of come to some resolution in common?
Thank you.
Yes, exactly. Very good question. And that's one of the reasons that I've announced that as soon as I'm MP, within the first 60 days, I will start an environmental task force as well as economic regional advisory groups. These groups will come together at least once a year to be able to work on these strengths and weaknesses that we've identified, as well as try to address our environmental problems and concerns before we get to the stage of trying to put a project through. Because finding out that we have these issues and ending up in litigation and conflict when we're trying to do these economic developments without knowing them ahead of time is a waste. And we need to tie the two together so we can proceed with our proper environmental concerns dealt with, as well as investing in our future with jobs and the economy.
Thank you. Mr. Spratt?
Yes, there's definitely a role for, I think, a member of parliament to listen, bring people together, and try and facilitate communication, clear, honest communication about the needs, and try and meet those things. I think that's always the way to go, rather than through the courts and try and fight things out in the courts, and somebody's going to lose. So we need to avoid that as much as possible. So certainly that would be something that I would do, is do anything I could to help constituents in the different communities across the area to ameliorate any problems they're having and disagreements they're having.
Thank you. Mr. Cullen?
The basis for this is about relationship and the role of the MP. And the nice advantage when you're the MP is people tend to return your phone calls, which is helpful. And so on a number of different occasions, with LNG, we had forums here and in Terrace, Rupert, and Smithers, where I was able to bring the LNG company, First Nations, local business and environmental interests all under one panel together and present that to the public so that the communities could make up their own minds about these projects, whether they were worth what the benefits were. I facilitated some work between First Nations and 2 mining companies, one in the Nass Valley and another one north of Fort St. James. One of those mines is now open and has been designed in conjunction with the local community, with a much higher degree of local jobs than they would have had otherwise. I think this is actually the path forward. I sometimes imagine if you had the full force of the federal government behind that kind of philosophy and that kind of approach, how much more we could get done and how much less time we'd spend in court.
Thank you. The order of the next question will be Mr. Spratt, Mr. Cullen, and Mr. Layton. Can I have your question, please?
Hi, my name is Sean O'Driscoll. I lived here in Kitimat for nearly 40 years. Now, what I would like to ask the panel is, what are you going to do about the racism in this country? For instance, discrimination. I've lost all what I was going to say here. That you have discrimination, you have, favoritism. Going on. For instance, I went in to buy a truck 2 years ago, and I paid $7,000 tax on it. And there's a certain segment of this society, such as the Indian nation, that don't pay dick all for towards taxes. And I would like to know what you're going to do about it when everyone else has to pay for their children's schooling, hospitals, medical, the whole 9 yards.
Thank you.
Are you going to get rid of this antiquated Indian Act?
Thank you. Just before you answer, that I just wanted to make sure that beeping was gone. Great. So, Mr. Spratt, please.
Well, yes, we want to reform the Indian Act, and again, as we talked about in the last question here, there has to be some communication. I think there has to be some acknowledgement that there's been discrimination and some practices that weren't wise and maybe were discriminatory. And we need to own up to that, and then we can't reverse those things, what's happened in the past, but we can go forward with communication again, honest communication, and apologizing for things that have gone wrong, and reform the Indian Act through consultation with the different groups, and that's about all that can be done. There's only so much, government can't make individuals stop discriminating unless there's ways, I guess, there's human rights commissions and those kind of things that are ways to do it, but that can be a hard process as well. So it's a tough issue, and I think reforming the Indian Act would be a start.
Thank you. Mr. Cullen.
Well, the Indian Act is a racist piece of legislation. It's right in the name. It was designed that way, and it does a lot more to harm First Nations people than it generally does to help. But where I would take exception to the question is that on first contact, we essentially made a deal. The Crown made a deal with First Nations, which wasn't all that hot a deal if you were Native, which was, we're going to take the land and the resources around here, and we'll never charge you tax. I think if given the option of making that deal again and First Nations said, keep your tax exemption, we'll keep the land, they would have taken it, not knowing how we were going to conduct ourselves with residential schools and all the rest of that. So I know it causes some chagrin when someone goes in to buy something and feels like it's discriminatory. Take it from the other perspective in terms of what was discriminatory and what's based in our laws right now. I don't think First Nations are living high on the hog or anything if you take a tour through a lot of communities. There is discrimination going on, but I'm not sure it's just characterized the way you put it.
Thank you. Mr. Layton.
So, yeah, I don't agree with the way you've put the question of where the discrimination has gone. We need to, through communication and respect, start working in partnerships to promote Canada for all people, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. The other thing we need to do is we need to get through the treaty process. It's been something that has been going on for decades. And as the government changes, things change, negotiators seem to take different tacks. We need to get this done so we can get some common ground set up so everybody knows the playing field. Right now, we have a huge amount of poverty within our First Nations communities, and we need to deal with that. For us to move forward, education, poverty, water, all the infrastructure has to be dealt with so we can start working together on a level playing field.
Thank you. The order of the next question will be Mr. Cullen, Mr. Layton, and Mr. Spratt. Can I have your question?
During the opening address, the Liberal candidate, if I remember correctly, made the blanket statement that the NDP does not have a plan. My question would be to all candidates, probably Mr. Cullen to rebut that, the Liberal candidate to substantiate that, and the Heritage Party to either confirm or support or otherwise that statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cullen?
Thank you, Mr. Brown. So what we presented, and more than a year ago now, the NDP has been rolling out its platform well in advance of the other parties and taking some risk, actually. Politically, you normally don't put out your platform so early. And we've talked about some essential things. One I've mentioned already is about having more value-added production, creating an incentive, and we have a program to do this, which is fully costed to, it's a carrot and stick approach. Give more incentive to people to add value to the natural resource and penalize those that choose to continue to raw export all of our wealth. I've talked about lowering the small business tax rate. I believe the affordable child care plan is actually an economic strategy to help particularly single moms and others enter the workforce again if they so choose. So the NDP is going to take some slags because of previous governments, but every year Finance Canada, every year does a report on which parties have balanced the books most often. And for the last 25 years, the NDP's come out first, Conservatives were second, and the Liberals were third. That's Finance Canada, and they're not exactly our friends on most given days.
Thank you. Mr. Layton?
So to answer your question, I said no plan that is going to work for us in our riding. And part of that is based on they have a strategy to balance the budget at all costs, plus all the promises for billions in spending from daycare that requires 40% of the funding to come from provinces, as well as many, many more promises that are going to take money when our economy is in a decline, which they have said time and time again. So to do the austerity and balanced budget and not kickstart our economy, that is not a plan that I feel will work within our riding. We need to invest in our infrastructure, we need to invest in our education, and we need to invest in moving forward with our economy. A balanced budget when we're going into a recession, or in a recession, isn't the way to go.
Thank you. Mr. Spratt?
I didn't really clearly hear that question, but I think I've picked up what it's about now. Basically, we want to reduce taxes and improve services by paying off the national debt. That's costing us too much, that interest. And we have, if we're not doing that, we're basically saddling our children and our grandchildren with it. And that isn't right. That isn't a moral thing to do. So we need to take responsibility for what we have. We may have to tighten our belt a bit, and it's tough to do in an economic downturn when oil's dropped and a lot of our revenue has dropped. But in corporate welfare, minimize red tape for small businesses and rebuild Canada's infrastructure by using the Bank of Canada to reduce dependence on the chartered banks. I don't know if that totally answers the question because I didn't quite understand it. I couldn't hear it. It's my old ears.
Thank you. The order of the next question. Oh, there's a rebuttal. Thank you, Mr. Cullen.
Yeah, just you got to understand. Thank you. Where where we differ on this one, and it's maybe politically strange for people, but the Liberals have committed to borrowing $30 billion and then another $30 billion in so-called alternative financing, whatever that means. That's either triple Ps or tolls or selling off things. They haven't clarified what that is. And $60 billion might not seem like a lot to borrow or mixed borrowing when compared to the $150 billion that Harper borrowed. But if you borrow at least the $30 billion, you don't pay back $30 billion. Anyone who's ever had a car loan or a mortgage, it's very, very expensive. And so they say, well, interest rates are low. Yeah, and they are low right now. Maybe they're not low 2 years from now, and the cost of that borrowing goes up dramatically. We're committing to putting nearly $4 billion into infrastructure in our first year, plus all the other programs which we fully costed. So people are going to use the brand and say we're not good at this and not good at that. Look at our platform, look at the costing, and then decide for yourselves. We're kind of prairie pragmatists, us. Pay as you go. Seems like a more prudent way to be.
Thank you. We have another rebuttal by Mr. Layton.
So this is a new leaf for the NDP. It is, and to be able to do what they've said, their costing that they put out, experts in the economy have said it was like Swiss cheese. When you look through it and try to figure out where the funding is going to come for all these provinces, the economists can't figure it out. So how they're going to do it is a mystery to most of us. Now, for us to borrow that money, now is the time to borrow it. Interest rates are low. We have people out of work. If we wait for the infrastructure crash that is coming, because we have infrastructure deficit, we are going to probably be in a recovered economy eventually, and we aren't going to have the workers. We're going to pay twice as much because the companies are busy and bidding high. Now is the time to do this investment in our future, in our infrastructure. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, the order of the next question will be Mr. Layton, Mr. Spratt, and Mr. Cullen. Can I have your question, please?
My name is Doug Thompson. We have First Nations communities in this country living in sub-third world conditions. Many of them haven't had potable drinking water for decades. They have abysmal schools and health care that is an embarrassment to any country. What specific plans have you got for assisting? I won't even say assisting. No, I'll take it. I think First Nations are probably fed up with the government doing things for them. No, what steps can you take to support First Nations in developing their own communities?
Thank you. Mr. Layton?
Very good question. And as MP, I'm not here when I'm elected as an MP to represent non-Indigenous or Indigenous separately. We are Canadians, and I will go to Ottawa, and the Liberals do have a plan, and we've committed money. But I will go to Ottawa and fight for every First Nations community within my riding to get what we need to fix the problems. And you are 100% correct. We have dismal conditions on a lot of our First Nation communities. There's 85 boil water advisories we just found out in one of our debates. That needs to be addressed. We are not going to be able to work together properly within Canada until we solve these issues. We have a two-tier system where we have a lot more poverty on our First Nations, we have a lot more social inequality, and we need to deal with that now.
Thank you. Mr. Spratt?
Well, I think a start, if we're talking about the water problems, that's a disaster. But I think the government could incentivize business development among the natives to go drill wells or whatever needs to be done and back them with some dollars to do that. But try and get them to make some businesses out of solving some of the problems. And where it's not possible, we're going to have to put some more dollars into it. But it's just deplorable that they would not have good drinking water. I know that there are Christian ministries that are drilling wells all over the world to try and help people in Africa that don't have good water. We certainly should be able to do something in Canada.
Thank you. Mr. Cullen?
Yeah, we heard it a bit earlier. There's some misconceptions about how Ottawa right now currently supports First Nations communities. Between 80, on any given year, 80 to 85% of all the money spent through Department of Indian Affairs stays in the Ottawa Valley. Stays right around Parliament Hill, and all of these lawyers and consultants, and it's like an industry that's formed up around, and so little of the money actually hits on the ground, which is where the struggles are with things like boil water. Yet it's not just connecting the funding to the people who need it. That's one part. The second is to, as one First Nations leader said to me the other day, get rid of this idea of being beggars in your own land. That the ability to generate, and I would point to the Haisla community here as being on the forefront of being able to generate and make deals. One of the things that's coming in the way of that is actually a federal government act that's forcing them to disclose business negotiations, which those very same companies that are enabling First Nations to get ahead will refuse to do. The government's actually harming First Nations by this act, and we need to get rid of it.
Thank you. We'll have one or two more questions from the audience. The order of the next question will be Mr. Spratt, Mr. Cullen, and Mr. Layton. Can I have your question, please?
We spend too much time in court, I agree. But that's only because the duty to consult is not legislated. It's left to a political whim of whatever government is in power. The Federal Environmental Assessment Act has not been amended to reflect the Crown's duty to consult meaningfully, as per case law, in your courts. To help fulfill the honor of the Crown, will your party commit to these needed changes so political interference is taken out of environmental assessments? Second part of the question, totally related, just yes or no. If you are elected into power, will your party reverse the Enbridge decision? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Spratt?
I'm going to have to apologize. I just didn't hear that well at all. I'm not. Could you speak a little slower and a little louder, please? Sorry, it's my ears.
So, the duty to consult and accommodate First Nations issues was laid out in your courts in over 200 court cases. The reason we keep going to court is because this duty has not been legislated into your Environmental Assessment Act. The question was, will you legislate this into the Environmental Assessment Act so we can take the politics out of assessing these types of projects like the Enbridge project? The second part of that question was a related question, yes or no. If you are elected into power, will your government reverse the Enbridge decision so we can quit this court nonsense? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Spratt?
I don't know if they could be reversed, the Enbridge decision. I think, as far as I know, there are people in favor of it, the nations as well, but certainly, I'm still having trouble getting my head around the exact question, but there needs to be consultation. It has to be honest, and there's got to be some cooperation between people in this country if we're going to go forward. We need to export. The federal government has jurisdiction over transportation because they have to be able to find a way to get things to market so we can increase income into the country. So I'm not sure if I'm doing an adequate answer to this, but certainly natives have to be consulted, and there needs to be more cooperation. And at the end of the day, somebody's going to have to make a decision to break any deadlocks. I don't know if I can say any more than that, but I didn't get it totally clearly.
Thank you. Mr. Cullen, please.
So let me start with the second part first. Yes to your question, we will set it aside. And in doing so, we'll join the vote that was taken here in this community. In doing so, we'll join with the Haisla community that has rejected this project. In doing so, we'll join with the Union of BC Municipalities and the 135 First Nations that signed on to a declaration saying Enbridge would never be built. So that's an easy one. The second one is about building consultation right into the federal act. As people may know, in one of those omnibus bills, the current government took the decision away from the review panel and put it into cabinet. And when we asked the government about it, the Prime Minister stood up in Parliament and said, well, we want to take politics out of the decision. So we gave the decision to politicians. That has to be reversed. No one's going to trust the process in which it's the Prime Minister who decides on every project going on around the country, and build the duty to consult right into the environmental legislation and then define what consultation actually means.
Thank you. Mr. Layton.
So I'm going to answer the second question first, too. We've said no. Publicly, it's in our platform, no to Enbridge. So it will not go ahead under Liberal government. As for the first question, we need to totally rebuild our environmental assessment process. It has been too secret, it's been gutted, and we need to build in that consultation for all peoples of Canada, because right now it's almost impossible to be able to get a hold of them, to consult them. I've had experience in the municipality where we wanted some input, and we never got any of that input. So a municipality is a level of government, and if we didn't get it, how does a regular citizen get it? So we need to totally change it. We need to entrench the consultation within it, and then we can restore the trust in our environmental assessment process.
Thank you. All right. The order of the next question will be Mr. Cullen, Mr. Layton, and Mr. Spratt. May I have your question?
Yes. My name is Walter Thorne. Been here for almost 40 years, and I've seen a transition in Kitimat. When I first came here, Kitimat was more than just an industrial town. We had a service sector, but we had government component. We had customs and immigration, I believe. We had a forest service. We had a real DFO office. Now, what I'm getting at is there's a lot of jobs out there, and yet all the eggs are elsewhere. And I'll tell you, I've invested quite a bit of time with the Kitimat Valley Naturalists and intervening. The question is that we have a lot of shipping, and yet we don't have services. Did you realize that all the cleaning vessels are in Prince Rupert? There's over 4 of them. The Harbor Clean, and also that the Coast Guard has, I went to Prince Rupert and I could count red Coast Guard vessels, and I believe there were 4 of them.
Can we have your question?
There's 0 in Kitimat. There's no Ministry of Environment. DFO is in Terrace. DFO is in Prince Rupert in a big way. No DFO
Can we have
here.
your question,
Okay.
please?
Could you, as individuals, commit to divvying up the good jobs in the good federal jobs so that Kitimat has more than 0 government jobs, and some jobs that are meaningful like
Thank
DFO
you.
would be here, and Coast Guard?
All right, Mr. Cullen, can I have your response to that?
It's, thank you for the question, Walter. This has been happening across the board. It's probably been happening more in Kitimat than in other places. We've seen the downgrade of services right along the West Coast, from Coast Guard to DFO, right through 30%, 35% staffing cuts in the last 3.5 years. So we've seen a depletion out to the point where we've got 2 DFO vessels checking the entire West Coast. We have a Coast Guard vessel that's meant to go all the way from Cape Caution up to the AB line on the outside coast. I mean, any notion of actual coastal protection is long since gone. In terms of locating the jobs specifically in Kitimat, Kitimat's obviously overdue to get some of those federal dollars back, get those federal positions back. My only hesitation, Walter, is around politicians telling how many DFO and how many Coast Guard. A Coast Guard station wouldn't be a bad start here, considering the level of traffic increase we're expecting. And it doesn't have to be incumbent upon the community having a gun held to its head on one project or another. I think it should be just there for the marine protection that we need.
Thank you. Mr. Layton?
So, Walter, thanks for the question. I will definitely commit to you that as your MP, I will work as hard as I can to bring what we can to Kitimat. As I said before, we need to sit down and identify our strengths and weaknesses so we can go to Ottawa and say, we need this here. And DFO and Coast Guard presence within a seaside community as Kitimat seems like a great idea. So if, as a group, this community identifies that this is stuff that they need their MP to go after, then yes, I will, and I commit to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Spratt?
Very hard to make hard and fast commitments, and I have to acknowledge that I don't know this area that well. I've been parachuted in here from Tumbler Ridge. I know that in my hometown there, mines have been shutting down. There's a downturn in the economy, and that's affecting, like the downturn in oil, is affecting the revenue that the governments have to expand. So if it's possible, they do it. But you know, there's a problem with balancing budgets and making things work, and it's easy to make promises that you can't keep. And but certainly, I would want to hear come back here and listen to what needs to be done here in this community from citizens here, and see what we can do to make some of the things that you're concerned about happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had told everyone we had 2 questions. We will only be able to entertain another 2 questions. Our time is running late in the evening, so please, I'm sorry if we weren't able to accommodate everyone. The next order of questions will be Mr. Layton, Mr. Spratt, and Mr. Cullen. Can I have your question, please?
So Canada at one point was the head peacekeeping nation of the world, and we have lost that since my birth. And we have become more militarized in the way that the Americans are. And I want to know what you're going to do to fix that, because I plan on pursuing that.
Thank you. Mr. Layton?
So just to confirm, you said peacekeeping, right? Yes. Okay, I just want to make sure I heard it right. Yes, I feel the same way as you. I grew up proud of our country. We were peacekeepers. We had the blue helmets. We stood between opposing forces that were in truces and made sure that that's where we were. We've gone away from that path, and we need to get back. I had one citizen when I was door knocking say, what would you do if you could do with how we have done things on the world with our military? And the first thing I said was, go back to the way we used to. And that's what we need to do. However, in this new world, we do have threats, and we will have to step up when our allies are in danger. But we need to get away from being more of the first strike type of thing in there and more of a peacekeeper. And that's where the world has seen us. That's where we need to get back, and we do it well.
Thank you. Mr. Spratt?
Well, I think the military in Canada took a big hit when they were wearing the blue helmets over in Rwanda, and General Dallaire had his hands tied behind his back along with all the other soldiers that were trying to do a job and save millions of lives that were destroyed over there in that strife. And it was the UN that kept saying, no, no, stand off, stand back, leave it alone. And there's a book by General Dallaire that'll explain that to you. Now, you know, times have changed as well. This is a time when there's a lot of terrorism that wasn't in the world before. There's much more now. And it's easy to just give easy answers, but I think we have to have a military that's ready to defend us first. That's what a military is about. And yes, we've done some great jobs in peacekeeping around the world, and we need to be prepared to do that too. I'm a little bit dubious about the UN controlling what our military is doing in light of what's happened in the past.
Thank you. And Mr. Cullen?
Well, I'm what they call a multilateralist, I guess. I believe in the purpose and guidance of the United Nations, and I think Canada used to play a very positive and strong role for a country that didn't have a large military presence. We're classified as what they call a middle power. Recently, not that long ago, Canada sought a seat on the Security Council, which is the most influential body in the UN, and the first time in our history as a country, the rest of the world looked at Canada's participation on that Security Council and rejected our application, because they didn't trust us and what role we would play. I think our position in the Middle East right now is completely out of balance. We're not positioning ourselves as an honest broker. And recently, it was reported that there were 14 Canadians that put on the blue helmet that day, putting us 177th in the world in contribution to peacekeeping. I think it takes enormous courage and dignity to be able to stand between those warring parties and maintain the peace. And I disagree with the direction that we've taken, moving Canada so far away from that traditional and time-honored role.
Thank you. This will be our final question this evening from the audience. The order will be for Mr. Spratt first, Mr. Cullen, and then Mr. Layton. Can I have your question, please?
Hi. So my last question is, what are your views on feminism in this country?
Can you repeat that, sorry?
Feminism in the country, and considering the statistics that man is above women at the moment.
Can you just repeat the last part? Sorry. Just the
feminism part.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Spratt, please.
I didn't hear any of that. I'm sorry.
What are your views of feminism?
What are your views on feminism?
Well, I think that feminism of the past has been hijacked by some radical feminists, and it doesn't mean what it used to. I don't think that feminism, if it stands for just abortion, which is the destruction of innocent human life when they're most vulnerable, that's not a good thing for the country. Originally, feminism, as far as equality is concerned, and equality of opportunity in that's all fine, and those are good issues that feminists got accomplished to a large extent. I'm not saying that's all the way, but basically the big problem with it is that they're pushing the most dastardly thing that's ever happened in our country, and that's the destruction that's already happened to 4 million innocent babies in the womb, because they have a philosophy then of might makes right. And they don't finish the statement. They say right to choose. Right to choose what? And where would any one of us be if our mothers had chosen not to keep us? We wouldn't be here tonight. So, okay, that's enough on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Cullen.
Well, I'm married to a feminist, and that's pretty awesome. I think that's just such a mischaracterization of the thing, that to suggest that equality has been achieved when women make 74 cents on the dollar compared to a man. And we had a federal government that ripped up pay equity legislation for federal employees and got rid of 70% of the funding for the status of women offices around this country that were working to end violence against women, when we know that women are disproportionately the victims of violence. To say that the job's been done is wrong. To say that we don't need some level of involvement from the federal government to support women is wrong. And I'm a pro-choice candidate. I come from a pro-choice party. I think it is, and I deeply believe this in my core, a woman's right to choose. And I don't think that's a radical feminist agenda, and if it is, then I guess I just became a radical feminist then.
Mr. Layton?
So I was a single parent. I raised my daughter, and I have 2 granddaughters now. And if you go back through my family tree, me and my brother were the last boys born in our family tree. So the Layton name is going to disappear in the lower generations of us. And I raised my daughter to be equal to any person on this earth. I will raise my granddaughters the same way. And anything that stands in the way, I will do whatever it takes to fight that. And I will take that attitude with me as an MP. We need equality between all people, women and men. And anybody that doesn't feel that way just doesn't belong in Canada doing something that hurts the chances of my daughter, my granddaughter, your daughters, and your granddaughters. Thanks.
Thank you. We have, on a final note, a rebuttal card given up by Mr. Cullen, so please.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of rebut myself a little bit here. Not really. I forgot to add a thing in that a lot of people don't realize, that when the Orange Wave came through in the last election, we elected the highest number of women into the official opposition in Canadian history. And in this election, the NDP is presenting 147 women as candidates, which represents 42%. And if we are elected government, would have the highest percentage of women in government in Canadian history. There are too many glass ceilings, particularly in corporate Canada, but also in the politics of this country. Too many barriers for women to get involved. And I remember one little bit of prejudice that went on. You remember we had a candidate who got elected in Quebec, and they dismissed her because all she had done is managed a bar as a single mom. And what right did she have to go and want to be a member of parliament? Well, she's proven out to be, as we suspected she would, one of the best MPs this country has ever elected. And I trust a single mom who's able to run a bar a lot better than a lot of the lawyers that show up and present themselves as members of parliament. We need more of them, not less.
Well, thank you for all of your stimulating questions and for the candidates and their insightful answers. We will now conclude with closing statements. The order will be opposite of the opening statements, so I would first like to invite Mr. Brad Layton of the Liberal Party of Canada to the podium for the first of our closing statements.
So first, I'd like to thank you all again for coming here. By coming here tonight, you basically are becoming ambassadors to what you saw tonight. So I'm hoping that you will take what you saw, talk amongst yourselves, talk with your family, friends, co-workers, and have everybody come out to vote and do an informed decision. So the Liberal plan is geared towards our economy, doing it environmentally sound, and improving our quality of life. So I believe on October 19th, the Liberal Party of Canada will form the new government. I want to be a part of that government. I want to ensure that our loud voice is heard in Ottawa instead of Ottawa coming back and trying to tell us what we need. As your MP, I will take our concerns, all our concerns from every community to Ottawa and I will fight for them. So I hope on October 19th, you've looked at the plans, you've judged them, and you vote for the Liberals under me, Brad Layton. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Layton. I'd like to ask Mr. Nathan Cullen from the New Democratic Party to make his closing statements, please.
Well, thank you very much to the organizers, to my fellow candidates, and of course for all of you for being here tonight. I like this stuff, and you can see why. We get to wrestle with all these great issues. I want to particularly point out and raise up the young folks that came out tonight and asked questions. That's what we need a lot more of in this country. We've been campaigning for almost 2.5 months now, and I'm starting to get going. But I do want this election to end, because it has been quite a while. Here's the thing. On October 19th, not only because, we're maybe preaching to the choir a bit here. You folks are all going to go out and vote, but you got to do a little bit more than that. You got to bring someone with you. Maybe a couple people with you. Maybe someone who's never voted before. Maybe someone who feels like they want to give up on the whole process, because the world is run by those people who show up to the meeting, those people who cast their vote. And here's some really good news that should make us all happy as British Columbians. The way the election's shaping up now, BC is really going to matter. No one's forming government without British Columbia. There's no chance that as soon as our polling stations close, Peter Mansbridge is going to get on the TV and say, we're now ready to announce the next government, even before they count our votes. They're going to have to hear from British Columbia. British Columbia is going to help decide that government, what kind of government that we want. It was once said by one of our founders, dream no little dreams, my friends. And Jack told us, never let them tell you it can't be done. We can bring in affordable childcare. We can bring in a cleaner, greener economy. We can bring in a government that respects the voices of its citizens rather than tries to divide them and conquer them that way, that we can do a lot more. We can make Canada the great nation that it is always meant to be. A symbol for the world of people learning how to get along together, build up that prosperous country that we all dream of. Thank you so much for being here. These last 11 years has been a remarkable honor for me. I hope to continue in your service as your member of Parliament. Thank you very much.
And last but not least, Mr. Don Spratt from the Christian Heritage Party of Canada.
Thank you again for coming and patiently listening to us. As I mentioned before, Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. That's the preamble to our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We have a Christian heritage. Doesn't mean everybody was a Christian that came to this country, but they had a Judeo-Christian moral consensus that was brought over from all over the Europe initially. And so we believe in this party that needs to be preserved. We believe we need God because He is supreme. He rules over the whole earth. He brought us here. And I'll just leave you a couple of thoughts from some people that I think know a lot more than I do. William Penn, founder of Pennsylvania, said, "Men must be governed by God or they will be ruled by tyrants." It's the difference between being governed. We ought to be governed from the inside out. We should have self-government. Otherwise, we need a police force to tell us what to do all the time. So Canada's kind of moved in that direction. Starting with the children, we need to reestablish that. Thomas Jefferson said, "And can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are the gift of God?" We've forgotten that, I think, to a large extent in this country. And another famous guy, General Douglas MacArthur, said, "History fails to record a single precedent in which nations subject to moral decay have not passed into political and economic decline. There has either been a spiritual awakening to overcome the moral lapse or a progressive deterioration leading to ultimate national disaster." So I think that's the big issue. We discussed a lot of issues, but the big issue is where are we going to go in this country, and in some instances we need to go back to where we were, the things that made us great in the first place. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, candidates. I have to say that this is my first time moderating, and you made my job exceptionally easy because I was told that I had to be really diligent about making sure that all of you were within your time, and I had no issues. So thank you for being so professional. Again, I'd like to thank our event hosts and sponsors, the Rotary Club of Kitimat, BC Northern Real Estate Board, the Chamber of Commerce, Mount Elizabeth Theatre, and the Northern Sentinel Press. A reminder that there are 4 advanced voting days, with polls being open from noon to 8 p.m. They are October 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, with General Election Day being Monday, October 19th. Please make your vote count. Thank you and good evening.